My nervosity, I spilled from a neighbor's that tray.
Oh, yeah.
A big full glass of wine, and even here, if you look closely, you can see a little bit red. So then they gave me on purpose this long, because I'm too lazy to change, to buy new. I know I'm totally anal here. And sometimes I get in a radically anal mood, and I like it. Like, you know what I like to do? I discovered this years ago. Uh, when I'm in a too lazy to go out to eat, then I go to the cheapest grocery stores, usually part of a, how do you call this, part of a gas station. And you get there, usually it's on the same shelf as dog food. This Spam or beans with whatever, this like 89 cents or whatever cans.
Right.
And I buy 3 of them, and for less than $4 I get a nice meal. Crazy. Okay, so how will this, where are we now? Concerning time, fuck it, it's 10. I know, session neurotic.
We've still got people coming.
We already talked. So, it's like you told me. At 5, I will be a little bit earlier here, of course. At 5:30 we begin. I talk for an hour. Half an hour we pretend we live in a democracy. And then there will be, will that work, some kind of book signing, or how did you define it?
Yeah,
I leave it. What happens after 7? No, no, just It's like nonetheless begin. Because if you don't begin, at the time.
I like Athens, so I'm not having to worry about it.
Because it's not fair. We are in the time of the next. Guys, let's look back. Okay. Before you is eating your back.
somewhere. And I feel like, you know, it's
Okay.
I'll find him.
So,
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started.
Appreciate everybody being here. If y'all could, just give a round of applause for Slavoj and Russ, as well as Andrew, who came in late to the game but was awesome enough to be here. I think he's technically on sabbatical, right? He's technically on sabbatical, but made a trip here so he could be here for this panel and everything. So, again, the reiteration of commitment, really wanting to be here for special purpose and not just to pimp and do whatever with their work. So, these guys have been awesome. Just let you know, Russ was at the very first conference. And so he's come a long way. I think you're close to 10-year dossier. He's close enough. So just keep that in mind. There's a few people here who have been here since the start. There's a lot of new faces. And again, in 2020, there'll be new people as the conference continues to evolve. So a couple of quick announcements. One is there's a slight program change, which I think Chris was able to kind of tell everybody. So that way everyone could see this panel and not feel like they were competing against it. So we moved those other sessions to later time slots today. The other thing is the project board is set up outside. So tomorrow is an unstructured day. Some people may have to get back at particular times. So the project board, the way to use that is, let's say for example, you want to talk about Jordan Peterson and Slavoj Žižek, as if nobody's heard that enough at this point. Then you can say, Dr. Zizek, I love Peterson, let's talk about it. Then you can write that and say, I'll be here at 9 in the morning. So if you want to go and y'all want to have a little powwow, if there's a particular project that you're interested in and you want to write with somebody or do something collaborative, you can say, I'm interested in this. So where's Moro? Where's Moro? Oh, so Moro is right there. One of the things that he and I are going to be working on is hopefully several volume series looking at kind of music foundations, musicology, all the way up to the third volume, and the integration of how you would use a Žižekian frame. As well as also, if you don't know, Slavoj loves music, and if you want to talk about something other than philosophy, get him on something like that. Not classical, ask him like, what is it, the Pooties? Or something.
Unfortunately, I am classical fully.
He tells you that. You can screw with him later. So that's one particular thing. So a lot of people, if you have something and you're kind of looking and find other people, put it on the project board and see what happens. So other than that, I'm going to kind of introduce everybody. Not really many introductions really need to be done. You know what? I'm not going to do this. I always do this. So I'm just going to pass the mic. And then I'll leave it on Slavoj to introduce himself, which is probably hates. Okay. So you want to start?
Yeah. Very.
Now it has to be under 30 seconds.
Yeah, but I hope you don't subscribe to this metaphysical linear notion of time. No, seriously, I will try to be as short as possible because there are sessions after this one, and if I hate something, it's when the guy who speaks before you is eating your time. Because my practice is then the organizer comes to you and says, sorry, but since the previous session went too long, could you maybe cut it shorter? So very briefly, I think Antonio suggested this session to you for a very simple reason. I'm getting old, indifferent towards criticism and so on, but I noticed that from an objective market standpoint, my stocks are falling the last 3 years. Okay, no, books are still selling, blah, blah, but like I got quite a lot of violent criticism. There even was among some leftists a whole group or movement with that, you know, what as they said in Rome, Carthago, the lendum est, or Carthago should be erased. And there was a group called Žižek, the lendum est, whatever, no? So I just would like to get your feedback, not in this stupid partisan sense, yeah, we are all after you, how stupid this criticism is. Because obviously, I did touch some sore points, whatever. Obviously, these are traumatic points, and I would really like your reactions here. I will just, so that I keep my word, enumerate the 3 points. If we disregard minor criticism, it all began with my stance towards immigrants in Western Europe, where just for pointing out some problems, which are real problems, I was, for example, in Germany and England, United Kingdom. Incidentally, how can you be here? Didn't you watch the marriage or the event of the century? Okay. I was considered a new right-winger, ideologist of new nationalists, and so on and so on. Of course, this is not true. But I think the reason was that I simply pointed out that there are simply problems. And in my view, this false humanitarian approach, open the gates, bring them in, there are no tensions, it's all right-wing imagination, and so on and so on. This serves those in power. The operation is so clear in Europe. They succeeded in getting in conflict those in power, to simplify it. 2 strata of the poor people, immigrants and local working class, and then they can play humanitarians and so on and so on. And in a Lacanian way, I tried to articulate where the problems are while emphasizing my openness towards immigrants. Let's just not escape from the problems. The second traumatic point is, of course, my comments on LGBT plus and Me Too. It's crazy how, although I always emphasized, I totally support their goals. So I am not, that letter was signed, you remember, signed by Catherine Deneuve, no? I'm not claiming, no, they go too far, we should be more considerate. I'm not that. My approach to LGBT plus is not, it's too crazy, too politically correct, but that in a way it's not radical enough. This politically correct purism is always, moralism is always suspicious to me. So, literally, I know 2 people who lost their job as part of this campaign for being friendly to me. Third problematic element is Trump, my stance on Trump. And here I also insist on it, especially in Europe, where the situation is slightly different. Where we are now is this strange situation where we have the usual centrist, corrupted government, and every 4 years we are called to vote, and like, oh, you should forget, or we should not forget all our differences, there is the real fascist threat then, and so on and so on. Like, the liberal center is using this new white supremacist whatever trend to prevent their criticism. This, as more radical criticism, this happened in a ridiculous way in France, where when some leftists said, okay, you should vote for Macron against Marine Le Pen, but nonetheless, my God, Macron stands for the politics which gave birth to Marine Le Pen. So we should open that case. They were accused by my friends from the Lacanian school, Lacanian and so on, ex-friends. They were accused of, it's a unique Stalinist phrase, Le Penon Trotskyist, like, appear to be Trotskyite leftists, but in reality they work for Le Pen, for the right. And they also accused me of being Marine Le Pen's, what's the term for fellow travelers, useful idiot. Well, my reply to them was, of course, maybe true, but they are definitely useless idiots. No? That's another one. So these 3 are the political points. And then, also, if you want to go more in this direction, the 4th one is the rise of a new tendency in theory, so-called, in all its different guises, object-oriented ontology. And this is basically a very interesting thing theoretically. And if you are interested in it, I think it's now distributed only in Europe, not yet here, together with two other guys, Frank Ruda and Agon Hamza. It just appeared in Europe, it should here in a month or now. A book, Reading Marx. The title shouldn't deceive you. At least my text has nothing to do with reading Marx, but it's there in 60, 70 pages. I try to settle accounts in detail in a very respectful, even friendly way, but nonetheless clearly differentiating myself from object-oriented ontology. That's the philosophical struggle going on. So this is what I see as topics. Now, please, the two bearded guys.
Okay, it's working. All right. Let's see. Out of these four topics that Slavoj brought up, the fourth one, the most recent object-oriented ontology, the three of us have essays in a collection that will come out at some point on subjectivity, subject matters is the title of it. So there's more. So you can read about that, and I think I saw a paper on the program about object-oriented ontology as well. But what I'm interested in, or what I want to take up, is the third part about the third point about Trump. I think that in some ways the question, if you want to put it this way, like what happened to Žižek, is the answer. I mean, the simplest answer I think is nothing, actually, because I really don't think anything has changed. If you go back, and I had a graduate seminar this semester in psychoanalytic theory, and as part of a unit on race theory, we looked at I had the class read the last chapter of Slavoj's book, Tearing with the Negative, Enjoy Your Nation as Yourself, and which is essentially mostly about the outbreak of nationalism following the end of the Cold War. And it's this, unfortunately, the craziest thing about reading that less than a month ago is that it's more, it's actually more appropriate today than it was back in '93. Yeah. It was heavily anthologized, that chapter in particular when it came out. And it's only now, I would say, that the actual theoretical stakes, or the actual the diagnosing of the political deadlock that Slavoj that he underlines there, or highlights for us, comes to the fore. So if you take Trump and nationalism, for instance, I would characterize it as a sort of, I think Trump in a way is the resurgence of postmodernism, even though we thought it was dead, a sort of superegoic fascism in a way. Trump's appeal, it lies precisely in the register of enjoyment, which Slavoj is always talking about and has been talking about since his first books in English. If the Trump phenomenon demonstrates nothing else, and this is in response to the ridiculous sort of caricatures and hit pieces, I think, that came out after Slavoj, quote unquote, endorsed Trump. But if the Trump phenomenon demonstrates nothing else, it's the efficacy of what Slavoj, in another early book of his, the subtitle of it, the book For They Know Not What They Do, calls enjoyment as a political factor. And this is clearly the case with the idea of the theft of enjoyment. Is this from Lacan himself, or is this one of these terms like ecstasy that it took Jacques-Alain Millard to?
It's Miller giving the political twist. Yeah,
I mean, this is exactly what's happening now with the Trump phenomenon. I mean, if you have an internal deadlock. I mean, in the contemporary U.S., the results of neoliberalization, right? The end of manufacturing as a result of finance capital, the outsourcing of jobs. So you have this deadlock that's internal to the system, and you project that onto an other or various others. So Mexicans who come here bringing gang violence, raping our children, stealing our jobs, or Muslim refugees who hate the American way of life. They're coming here to create some sort of, ISIS terrorist cell. Politically correct professors maybe who won't allow us to use racist or misogynistic, sexist terms. All of these others, so the narrative goes, if according to the Slavoj Lacanian frame, have stolen our enjoyment, right? And our here in the sense of real America. What was it, Sarah? That genius Sarah Palin said, the real America. And the logic here is if you could just get rid of these people, we could all be like Trump, who seems to be able to enjoy without any sort of repercussions. This would be péjouissant in Lacanian terms. But this is where the line "to make America great again" comes, relates to. And I think Slavoj even talks about in that chapter the vague notion of our way of life, and so that which is the specter that, or the sort of national thing that the other is trying to. So I think that because Slavoj points out, some of the real problems or tensions that are inherent to the refugee crisis, and also the problem with, the example here wouldn't be Macron, but would be Hillary Clinton, right? So, Trump and the sort of nationalist, fascist specter, we all have to, we all have to align with Hillary Clinton and the sort of neoliberal centrist agenda. I think that if you read these sort of provocations, absent of any of the other theory of Slavoj, where there's close to 30 years of it, I think then, of course, you're going to want to misinterpret his and mistake his positions. But nobody who reads him seriously, I think, can actually believe this or sustain this sort of critique. So I actually think the answer is actually to go back and to reread Slavoj's earliest work, because I think that if you read that, you'll see actually that theoretically, positions have advanced, but that I would say that Slavoj hasn't changed. The theory hasn't changed much. It's the way in which we react to it. So that's my opening.
Yeah. So, just a few quick things here. You had mentioned this question of the position. That we have these ideas, we have these theses, we have these positions, and with Slavoj's remark on Trump, I was hearing you speak from the position in the classic Lacanian sense of from where in discourse do you speak, rather than here is my idea. This is sort of where I fall politically or ideologically. So, for instance, I think that statement was heard in a sort of Hegelian manner, where there's this kind of retrospective point of view, where vote for Trump because just wait for the wild dialectical reversal to come, and that was your point, which was to say get Trump in there, it'll blow apart the right, it'll blow apart the left. We are kind of seeing that in a way. Okay, so it's interesting to sort of return to that thesis. In the abstract, I had to go back and watch the clip, but in the abstract, I always thought about that statement from the in relationship to what is the position, where is he sitting in relationship to discourse? Is he sitting in the place of the hysteric or sitting in the place of the pervert? Is he the individual who sort of knows the ideological injunction so well as to utter it without question, as in the status of the pervert, which is an interesting, because pervert is an identity you adopt in your pervert's guides, et cetera, versus the perspective of the hysteric, who understands the ideological injunction, questions it at the same time, reveals its contradictions, and then even asks if the apparatus has in itself enough to even be worse, to sort of exert more pain on me or inflict more damage on society and so forth. So that was the first thing, was just the question of position. Clarifying, are we talking position in the strict Lacanian sense, or position in terms of ideas? And then the question about the position of ideas then opens up, I think, a risk here, because I sometimes wonder what we're talking about is ideas. This is that liberal idea where you have your idea, I have my idea. They'll be contested in some kind of public sphere or place. And of course the other word for this is the marketplace of ideas. And as soon as you introduce that phrase, then you know that it's a market, it's bullshit. The invisible hand, it's bullshit. What governs this market? It's not an abstraction. It's the means of representation, the means of production, all the way down, right? So ideas become a risky thing, okay? And it almost feels like this strange perversion of this Humean idea, again, of we have perceptions. It's almost as if the psychologies have sort of regressed to this older notion of we have perceptions and then we have ideas. We are struck by perceptions, flashes of light, sensations that come to us in the outside world. Then we form ideas. But the brilliance of the Humean position is that the ideas are fake traces of perceptions. Ideas are shit, and you can make up golden mountains with them. You can say anything about ideas. And the third bit about it, which is sort of a development later in Hume's work, is you can have ideas about ideas, okay? This is the tricky and problematic thing, because, so say for instance, just trying to qualify or characterize, where an idea is coming from in the political sense. So we take this figure already sort of summoned, Jordan Peterson. Is he alt-right? No, he's not alt-right. You're not listening to his ideas. You're not looking at his footnotes. It's well documented, right? It's constantly sort of, there's a slipperiness there in terms of trying to pinpoint the idea to a particular kind of politics. And I would propose and just leave you with this, which is, there's sort of quarter of the way through Mein Kampf. You might remember this passage. Hitler talks about designing the Nazi flag. Do you remember this? He's like, I came up with the perfect hue of red. I designed the circle in such a way that it would be very proportionate to the swastika inside. And sort of feeling this kind of stylistic project within the politics. And I think one of the things to remember and to sort of deal with is the style of this stuff, okay? Neutral term stuff, rather than the ideas which are sort of exposed to the marketplace ideas. So here is a style, and I want to leave you with a style and ask you whether this is something that can be engaged. So, if you slump around with the same bearing that characterizes a defeated lobster, so...
This is Hitler.
Oh, okay, now guess, you'll have to guess. This is, all right, you're already on track, okay. If you slump around with the same bearing that characterizes a defeated lobster, people will assign you a lower status, and the old counter that you share with crustaceans sitting at the very base of your brain will assign you a low dominance number. Okay? So we have ideas on the one hand, and we have just the way it's written. We have the style of the thing. This sounds and reads patently ridiculously, right? But if you talk about the idea and abstraction, this could be what? This could be either Hitler, or this could be some kind of post-human animal studies sort of point of view, right? So I'll leave you with that. Thank you.
Reply in a friendly way, and then maybe I would like to hear it from you, critical points where I made a wrong move and so on. First, just to clarify this Jordan Peterson problem, no? I'm less and less interested in debating him. Why? Because when I wrote the text for Independent, I knew only two parts of him. His conflictual stance, especially in Canada at the beginning, towards all this LGBT plus naming and so on, and his attitude towards what he calls cultural Marxism. And my stance towards him, as far as I knew that, was not just fanatically against, but it was that when he criticizes LGBT plus political correctness and so on, he nonetheless sees some problems, identifies them correctly, but of course gives them a wrong term and so on and so on. But then his notion of cultural Marxism, and from his partisans who attacked me ferociously on the web, I didn't get a good answer. And this is why I don't buy the theory that you mentioned, no, read him closely, he's not alt-right, he's really almost a centrist.
That's not my theory.
No, I know. Yeah. That's your usual too. It's not me, it's Hitler. No, it's not me. It's the idea that's out there. Sorry. Look, what I want to say is that something, I don't know how it is in the States, but in Europe, horrible things are happening. You think you are deep shit with Trump. Maybe we are in an even deeper shit now in Europe. If you, okay, this is still a marginal phenomenon, but it's symptomatic. If you don't have anything to do, go to Pirate Bay or whatever you have here and download something called Europa. Not Europe, but Europa, written in this way. And this is incidentally how right-wingers, fanatical, like to identify the enemy today. You know your greatest writers, ironically, how is he called? The Left Behind series, Tim LaHaye. Those bestsellers. He wrote even a novel called Europa, and the idea is clear. Forget about Arab Muslim fundamentalists. Behind all of this is really Europe. Europe is a plot against United States and so on. The idea of United Europe. That's why Trump is totally in this line, but now again he attacked Europe for not complying with American messaging. But what I want to say is that, okay, Europa, just put it on Pirate Bay and you say, Europa, the last battle. It's pretty horrifying. It's a 10 one-hour series, very professionally made by some Swedish guy, but in English. To cut a long story short, full rehabilitation of Hitler, not between the lines, but directly. It says the origin of Bolshevism and communism are the Jews, Jewish capital. They financed Trotsky, who was in 1916 in New York, and in this way directly organized the October Revolution, and then they go on. And the idea is that Hitler was really an extremely good guy who did a miracle in Germany in a couple of years. He changed Germany from a bankrupt country to, so they claim, 37-8. Germany had the highest living standard in the world because they withdrew from the international banking system, so Jews no longer could control it. So that's why the Jewish lobby decided for war. Hitler desperately tried to prevent the war, making peace offers all the time. And then today the same plot is going on. And in the same series, you have almost 1 hour on cultural Marxism. You hear statements, you see the images of Adorno, Marcuse, all of them. And the dream is this one. I like it almost. That when in the early mid-1920s, it became clear to Comintern, old Lenin, he wasn't old before he died, and then Stalin, that there will not be a revolution in Western Europe. They made this judgment. Yes, because we underestimated the strength of Christian Western freedoms and so on and so on. So we have to do it in 2 steps. First, we have to ruin the West spiritually, corruptly, and then we will be able to conquer it. And this is going on now. That's the thesis. And then openly ends up with, today with political correctness, blah, blah, all that, LGBT, they are succeeding, the original Comintern plan. And the idea is it ends like this openly. We need a new Hitler. It's open. But what I'm saying is that now you will say this is extreme madness. No, if you just extrapolate from the ongoing rightist elements, you come to, it's just they drew the consequences to the end. I will give you one interesting example. All this Jews anti-Semitism stuff. Did you notice, it's so funny for me, this in right-wing critics of the radical left, you find coexisting two radically opposite stances. A, the original one, which is now returning, communism is Jewish. Jews are to be blamed for it, they financed it, and so on and so on. B, and this is popular especially in France, but also here, communism is anti-Semitic. Like my certainly not friend Bernard-Henri Lévy even said openly, anti-Semitism will be leftist or there will be no anti-Semitism. Like, forget about the old anti-Semitism today, is the left. I think that we can bring the two together. I coined a new term which didn't cause any problems, even in Israel with my friends. They admitted it. It's not a joke. Zionist anti-Semitism. You know, this is, as I've written, an attitude which was strong. Well, Nazis began with it. I quote, I think already in my last book, or I'm not sure, Reinhard Heydrich, remember, the guy, I will be now very sarcastic, and this is always traumatizing. Heydrich, the excellent German string quartet player, this is always traumatizing. No, Heydrich, Wannsee Conference, organizer of Holocaust. You know that in the evenings he met with his fellow officers and they played late Beethoven's string quartets. Isn't it something ontologically wrong, unjust in it? This is for me, I'm sorry if I tell you that I'm an atheist, the ultimate proof that God doesn't exist. How could God allow for a guy who is the personification of evil to really enjoy playing what can be, to put it in pathetic terms, the highest? Sorry?
No, that was making me think. I'm not remember his name, but the pastor, the evangelical pastor who spoke who gave the prayer at the opening of the U.S. Consulate in Jerusalem, is he's the same one who who claimed all gays and Jews are going to hell. Like this, it wasn't Pat Robertson.
Pat Robertson, the greatest. Don't touch it.
The guy
that's crucial.
Yeah.
And this began with Heydrich. He wrote this incredible, in 57-8, a text where he says, Jews are a great people, dynamic, productive. They should move to Palestine. We will fully support them there. We just don't want them here. That is to say, here you are anti-Semitic, there you are a Zionist. I quoted long ago, you remember that sympathetic friend of ours, and sarcastic, Breivik, the neo-Nazi Norwegian guy who went to, your house and so on now, shooting sprees, they are nothing compared to what he did. And he says the same in his text. There we should fully support Israel. As a bastion, here we should, and this is the most tragic thing, is that the Israeli government, and that was the proof, is playing with it. For example, it was such a shock in France, friends told me, when a year ago Netanyahu made a call to French Jews, it's not safe for you there, come to Israel. You know that all the truly anti-Semitic right in France greeted this. You see, we agree with Netanyahu. Go out of here and so on. So what I'm saying is that and now I come just to the end in this conspiracy theory. And what is so sad is that in Europe, at least in my country, it's no longer this type of, to put it cynically, usual conspiracy theory where, we sit in a bar after and we say crazy things. It's part of the public discourse. It's horrible. And this is why in Europe, Soros is a thorn, hated, George Soros. You know why? They claim, it's a beautiful theory in a sarcastic way, but it's the truth, that the Arab-Israeli conflict is a fake. It's made for our media to dupe us, not to see that they are really the same. We have the Arab immigration refugees organized by the Jew Soros, and they have all, Islam fundamentalists and Jews, the same goal to ruin, to destroy Christian Europe. Now what worries me is that this is no longer some kind of a small conspiracy theory and so on and so on. It is, even if they don't dare to say it openly, it is what is behind, if they care to think a little bit, what is behind this new anti-immigrant wave. So something tremendous is happening. Point two, yes, just to conclude with Jordan Peterson. So he is part of this myth, cultural Marxism. Well, my position is here as if LGBT plus and Me Too, the ultimate Marxist conspiracy to ruin the West. My critique of Me Too, very partial, I'm on their side, but just some of their problematic aspects is again that, no, if anything, they are the last attempt of liberals to prevent a more authentic radicalization, political ones. They are not the left, they are the last defense against the left. But with Jordan Peterson, you know what's my problem? I like to debate with neo-fascists, with but sorry, Jung is too much for me. When I just open, I cannot buy it for moral reasons, but in a bookstore I opened a little bit these 12 rules for life. Fascism is okay, racism is okay, but my God, all those wise advices, you know, like when you see a dog caress him or whatever, that's too much for me. But just my point is nonetheless, think about his exploding popularity. You know, avoid this liberal smugness and satisfaction, ooh, that idiot, and so on. Why did he explode so much? Where did we, with all our political correctness and so on, where did we fail? Where did we fail? And if I may go on just a little bit on, you know what, as critical intellectual we should do? Whenever there is a new progressive movement, and I undoubtedly am here for Me Too and all of that and so on, we should see the complexity of the problem, and this is, I mean, the ABC of a leftist intellectual for me, that you don't buy simple solutions, you see the potential negative consequences. For example, to give you two simple examples and provoking you, it's very simple. In my next book, it will be much more elaborated. After criticizing all this many position, blah, 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 they are now elaborating, Me Too, at least in Europe, some proposals about, okay, but to be sarcastic, but benevolently, billions of people want to fuck and date and so on and so on. So how to do it? And they are elaborating proposals which are, I think, very ambiguous. Let me just give you, to amuse you a little bit, and I want your reaction. Two examples. I totally agree with Me Too guys who say no means no is not enough. There is also something that you can call a coerced yes. A woman says formally yes, under pressure, but, and so on and so on. I totally agree with it. I just don't think that you can solve the problem in a simple, legalistic way by demanding a more affirmative yes. Like one text claims it's not enough for a woman to say yes, it may be she must say, give, as they say, a triple, joyously affirmative yes. Can you imagine this functioning in real life? Why not? There is a woman who wants to get, why not? There is nothing wrong in it. Who wants to get screwed by a guy. It's absolutely her right. And she gives him the hints and so on. The guy is shy, politically correct, nothing bad here, and doesn't want to reply to her advances. He is not sure that, he will. And then, what should she do? According to this rule, she should jump and front her, yeah, please fuck me or whatever. It doesn't work in this way. You cannot solve this problem by fixing explicit rules. Or another one. This idea, which I again agree, I see the dangers, I agree with it. This, at every time, all the partners in sexual act should have the right to withdraw. I agree. But be aware of what new forms of violence this opens up the space for. I had some friends, I broke with them, who admitted to me that they were practicing this with the express purpose to humiliate the partner. Like, sorry for being trigger warning, vulgar. You make love already, almost the woman is aroused, and then when you have her, you say, sorry, I now use my right, I withdraw. With express purpose to humiliate her. And I know women doing the same incidentally. So, you see my problem, the lesson is what? Not we should just do it and so on. But we should be aware that about this, how should I put it, regulative, almost legalistic thinking of Me Too. It doesn't work in this way. The change has to occur at a more substantial level. Just briefly, if you allow me, so that I don't really talk too much, the notion, very suspicious of way of life. I know many right-wing populists use it. No, it's our way of life, and so on and so on. But I think there is a reality of way of life. And correct me if I'm wrong, in Europe I see this problem. When, for example, when I have debate with my radical leftist friends in Europe, they tell me, no, this conflict of ways of life is just a bogus, white, racist, suprematist notion. We can just tolerate each other. And then they gave me always this simple example. When Africans come to France, of course, isn't it beautiful? Doesn't it make us more rich if they sing their songs, if they dress the way they used to dress, if they practice their cuisine, and so on? I say perfect, but for me, the core of a way of life is not this. The core of a way of life is modes of enjoyment, how sexuality is organized, and relations of authority. Who has the power in their community and so on. And the moment you leave behind this simple topic, of course, who cares what kind of food or what kind of songs you are singing, but these problems emerge. For example, I'm sorry if I use an example which was known, I used it in one of my earlier books. It happened about 10 years ago in Slovenia. Roma, politically incorrect term, gypsy girl, ran for her family because her father wanted to, she was 13, her father wanted to marry her to his friend in a Roma way. And then, of course, all feminists in Slovenia supported her, but then her father went public with a simple convincing statement. He said, are you aware that arranged marriages are the very core of our group identity? If you take this from us, we disappear as an ethnic group in 2-3 decades. What can you answer him? You see, this is a problem. Because all the liberals there is an inconsistency in this, and I'm not proposing a simple answer. We Europeans know we should impose our standards. I'm just saying it is a serious problem. And to conclude, a wonderful story that I'm stealing this from Alenka Zupancic, our friend, who told me that she read somewhere that this happened recently at an American campus. It's a beautiful, simple story. At some campus, maybe you heard it more in detail than me, allegedly this happened. There was a swimming pool where some students, girls in bikinis, were lying on the sun and swimming a little bit. The nearby building was getting its, how do you call it, facade, plaster, remade. And there were some Mexican workers. who, of course, because that's how usually it is, right? No commitment from me. They started to do what they have a wonderful term in Latin America, el piropo, these erotic, funny remarks. They make this kind of suggestive remarks, not aggressive, just there was no threat. And the girls complained, this is harassment. Of course, everybody knew that there was also a class dimension. These were upper class girls and Mexicans were poor workers. But you know how they solved the problem? This embodies for me the worst of political correctness. It was like the swimming pool and nearby building, just close to the building, they made a plastic wall so that the Mexican workers were not able to see the girls. Plus, they built a special plastic covered tunnel for the workers to approach the building so that at no moment were they able to see the girl, and everybody was satisfied, no harassment and so on and so on. But for me, there is something simply horrible in this. And now to avoid a misunderstanding. Of course, in some sense, both sides were right. The Mexican workers, when they complained, this is a class and racial dimension. If instead of Mexican workers asked, there were to be rich white guys there on the balcony, you probably wouldn't complain. And the girls who said this is harassment. But I don't think you can solve the problem in this way. Again, my message is always the same. There is a problem with this. And for example, like that example that I mentioned, the Slovene police, a Roma girl comes to you. You have to do something, to cut a long story simply. You cannot say, no, this is a complex multicultural problem, European imperialism is to blame. Okay, fuck you, but what will you do then? The choice is simple. Will you return the girl to the family, or will you somehow protect her? How, if her family is looking for her? In Germany, so that you will not, again, accusing me that I'm mentioning some case which happens rarely. In Germany, exactly such a situation happens, it's not so much arranged marriages as an immigrant refugee daughter wants to escape from her family. She wants to have German boyfriends and so on, and family wants her back. They have the whole system of now already 25 asylum homes. They are treated then the girls like, what do you call this, protection of, witness protection program. They are given a new identity and so on. Again, I'm not saying look at barbarian immigrants. I'm saying the worst thing we can do here is to claim, no, these are just right-wing problems, let's ignore them. They are not. And it's absolutely crucial to find a way here. Not to avoid. The catastrophe in Europe is that the left liberal attitude is, if we even cover this in the media, it just serves racist, so let's ignore it. Yes, and then you get populists in power. I just want to admit complexity and admit that ultimately there is no easy solution here. It sounds so nice to say, oh, all groups should peacefully coexist, respecting each other. Yeah, but groups always interact. How do you fix the rules of this interaction? In British imperialism and before, the solution was simple, because the British simply didn't care what happens to them. Like, let Hindus burn their widows or whatever, who cares? But we obviously live in a global culture where, and I tend to agree with my right-wing friend, but he's intelligent, Peter Sloterdijk, who said that maybe we should learn some kind of distance again. Maybe the problem is not integration, but too much of integration. You know, in the sense of, maybe this is one serious solution, a non-racist one. Cultures do need different ways of life. They should mix, it's very good, but don't, if you throw different cultures, ways of life violently together, it is a complex situation. Again, I'm not offering a solution. I'm just saying, let's confront this problem. I'm sorry that I talked so much, but now I will shut my stupid mouth, which still had those traces of nerve inflammation, so I hate myself seeing myself. Yeah. What will you know? From my KGB informer's net. If the news about you I got, the secret reports are correct, you will now defend Jordan Peterson?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, when Slavoj originally proposed this, I was kind of taken aback because to kind of review critiques and criticism is almost a constant thing, especially after 2016, and it was right before the last conference. He had come from Left Forum. Left Forum picked up a lot of shit when people had taken out of context and tried to essentially roll out and what do they call it, like surprise you, railroad you.
Yeah.
And so if you read, so for example, if you read Parallax View, because somebody was talking about it earlier, then one of the famous lines in there that people love is talking about fist fucking as a concept with Foucault. If you purely just pull that out and you start pulling out other bits and pieces, then you could read and misinterpret Slavoj in a very kind of perverted way, right? So you're trying to pervert the perverted in a sense. And that comes from where these critiques and attacks I see is mostly